Have you ever been hurt by someone, looked at the situation and just thought, enough, never again like this? This stops now? If this has happened to you, stay with me, because today, you'll learn how to stop it for good without hurting yourself in the process. Real change happens when you stop explaining yourself. You don't need elaborate reasons or carefully worded justifications for saying no. You just say it, clearly, firmly, and without hesitation. Here's exactly how to make that happen. First, commit to clarity. The next time someone asks for more than you want to give, whether it's your time, attention, or energy, pause and remember your limit. Before responding, clearly define what you're comfortable with and stick to it. You don't need to negotiate internally. Trust your gut and respond firmly. Second, stop apologizing. Eliminate the habit of saying sorry when you set a boundary. If you constantly apologize for protecting yourself, you reinforce the idea that your boundaries are negotiable. They're not. Simply state what you can or can't do without further explanation. For example, I won't be able to help with that today. Third, maintain consistency. The strength of your boundaries relies entirely on consistency. If you enforce them sometimes but cave at others, people will keep testing them. Practice saying no regularly, even when it feels slightly uncomfortable, to make it clear that your boundaries aren't flexible. Fourth, be prepared for pushback. Initially, people may question or challenge your decisions. That's fine, expect it. When this happens, resist the urge to justify yourself or revert to old patterns of over-explanation. Instead, calmly restate your position and move on. This teaches others quickly that you mean exactly what you say. Fifth, use clear language. Ambiguity weakens boundaries. Rather than vague statements like, maybe another time, say, I can't commit to that. Being direct communicates your message without room for misunderstanding. Sixth, practice emotional neutrality. When delivering your boundary-setting statements, keep your tone calm and neutral. Avoid irritation, defensiveness, or aggressiveness. Emotional neutrality conveys strength and maturity, making your boundaries harder to challenge. Lastly, accept consequences positively. Some people might react negatively when you begin clearly enforcing your limits. That's a natural filtering process. People who respect your emotional health will stay, and those who depended on your lack of boundaries will naturally fall away. Accepting this consequence is essential to maintaining your self-respect. Saying enough is practical, straightforward, and empowering. By clearly and consistently setting boundaries, you teach others exactly how you expect to be treated. This is how you stop letting people hurt you again, by being clear, decisive, and uncompromising in your respect for yourself. Imagine never again having to say yes when you really want to say no. Imagine how it would feel to confidently decline without feeling guilty, obligated, or pressured to justify your decision. Establishing clear, practical boundaries is exactly how you achieve that freedom in your daily life. Setting boundaries isn't an abstract concept. It's a concrete, learnable skill that gives you immediate benefits. It makes your relationships healthier, reduces stress, and saves valuable time and energy. Yet most people never truly learn how to establish boundaries clearly and effectively. That's why you often find yourself drained, frustrated, or feeling taken advantage of. But here's the good news. You can easily fix this. The key is to stop treating your boundaries as negotiable suggestions. From today onward, think of them as simple rules for how you'll allow others to treat you. If someone asks for your time, attention, or energy beyond what you're comfortable giving, your answer can be a firm, unapologetic no. This direct approach might feel unfamiliar initially, but it quickly becomes natural when you see how well it works. Clear boundaries simplify everything. They remove confusion, eliminate unnecessary drama, and let others know exactly where they stand with you. People begin to respect your decisions because they understand there's no room for misunderstanding. The first step toward setting effective boundaries is becoming absolutely clear on what you will and will not accept in your life. Clarity eliminates confusion and simplifies decisions. Your boundaries aren't flexible suggestions. They're straightforward, personal rules you set in advance before any situation arises. You don't need to wait until someone challenges your boundaries to define them. In fact, it's best if you identify them beforehand. Start by reflecting practically. What situations usually cause you discomfort or irritation? Which requests do you consistently accept, even though you wish you didn't? Write these specific situations down in a list. Be direct and honest. Don't judge your answers. Simply identify the situations clearly crossing your comfort line. For example, you might notice you frequently agree to work extra hours or repeatedly answer calls from toxic individuals. These are concrete examples of situations where you need to establish firm boundaries. Once identified, turn these points into clear-cut rules. Avoid vague language like, "I'll try to avoid that." Instead, state precisely, "I don't answer calls after 8 p.m. or "I don't work on Sundays." Clear boundaries are always specific. The next step is to communicate these boundaries directly to those involved. You don't need explanations or justifications. Simply state your decision plainly. "From now on, I'm not available after 8 p.m. If needed, we can talk tomorrow." That's all you need to say. Of course, some people might try to test these boundaries, but their attempts shouldn't change your decision. If someone insists, calmly repeat exactly what you previously stated. Consistent clarity is powerful because it leaves no room for misunderstanding. With this practical approach, you'll quickly get used to the idea that setting clear boundaries is both simple and effective. The simpler you keep this process, the easier it becomes for you and those around you to respect your limits without resistance. By committing daily to clarity, you continuously strengthen your confidence and significantly reduce the likelihood that anyone will ever cross your boundaries again. If you truly want to stop people from hurting you, removing apologies from your boundary-setting vocabulary is crucial. Apologizing every time you enforce your boundaries sends a confusing message. It suggests your limits are flexible or negotiable. To establish clear, respected boundaries, you need to eliminate unnecessary apologies entirely. Most people learn from an early age that saying no without explaining or apologizing is somehow rude. You've probably been conditioned to soften your refusals with apologies like, "Sorry, I can't," or "I'm sorry, but that's not possible right now." While politeness is valuable, unnecessary apologies undermine your authority and make your boundaries easy to challenge. The first step in stopping this habit is awareness. Pay close attention to how often you automatically apologize in daily conversations, especially when setting limits. For a few days, actively note every unnecessary "sorry" you use. You'll likely be surprised at how frequently it occurs. Next, practice clear and direct responses that replace apologies. For example, instead of saying, "Sorry, I can't come," simply say, "I won't be able to attend." Instead of, "I'm sorry, but I need some space," state directly, "I need some space right now." Removing apologies immediately increases the authority of your message. Initially, this can feel uncomfortable. That's natural. To overcome this discomfort, rehearse boundary-setting statements without apologies beforehand. Say them out loud, clearly and confidently until they become familiar. The goal is to condition yourself to deliver these statements smoothly and naturally. When you communicate your boundaries without apologies, others quickly recognize you mean exactly what you say. There's no confusion or room for negotiation. They understand that your limits are firm and intentional, not emotional reactions. By consistently practicing boundary setting without apology, you'll notice a positive shift in your interactions. People will respect your boundaries sooner, and you'll experience fewer situations where your limits are tested. Ultimately, dropping unnecessary apologies empowers you. It builds confidence and ensures your emotional needs are clearly understood and respected. When you start clearly enforcing your boundaries, It's natural to encounter pushback. People who previously benefited from your lack of limits will initially resist the new standards. Expect this. Prepare for it. If you know it's coming, you'll handle it confidently and effectively without compromising. To practically handle pushback, first understand that resistance isn't necessarily personal. It simply means someone is adjusting to your clearer boundaries. Often people are used to getting immediate attention or easy concessions from you. When you clearly enforce a boundary, you break their familiar expectations. Your response to resistance should always be calm, clear, and firm. Practice maintaining a neutral, emotionless tone when someone challenges you. Don't become defensive or argumentative. Simply restate your boundary, clearly and without apology. For example, if someone questions your decision not to answer calls after a certain hour, calmly respond, "I'm not available after 8 p.m. We can speak tomorrow." Another effective method for handling pushback is to anticipate typical responses in advance. If you know someone tends to push against your boundaries, rehearse responses ahead of time. This preparation helps you remain steady and calm during the interaction. For instance, if a co-worker usually insists on after-hours meetings, practice clearly stating, "I handle work only during business hours." Avoid explaining yourself further, even when pressured. The more explanations you offer, the weaker your boundary appears. People often perceive justifications as opportunities to negotiate. Instead, confidently repeat your initial statement without modification. This sends a powerful signal that your limits are definitive. If resistance persists despite your consistent response, recognize that it's perfectly acceptable to end the interaction politely. Statements like, "I've explained my decision and I won't discuss it further," are entirely appropriate. Ending the conversation sends a strong message that your boundary is not open to debate. Ultimately, preparing for pushback means accepting it as a normal, temporary phase. The more consistent you are in responding calmly and clearly, the faster others will adapt. Soon, the pushback subsides, replaced by a new respect for your boundaries and the practical, predictable nature of your interactions. The way you communicate your boundaries determines how seriously others take them. If your words leave space for interpretation, people will assume they can negotiate with you. That's why being direct isn't just helpful, it's essential. You don't need to raise your voice, and you don't need to be harsh, but you do need to be clear. Vague phrases like, "I'll try," "maybe," or "we'll see," create confusion. They suggest you haven't fully decided or that your answer could change if someone pushes a little harder. That's exactly the kind of opening that leads to pressure, guilt, or manipulation. When you start using firm, direct statements, your boundaries become easier for others to understand and harder to ignore. Saying, "I won't be able to join," is different from, "I'm not sure yet." One is a decision. The other is an invitation for someone to convince you. If directness feels uncomfortable, it's likely because you're not used to it. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's new. Start small. Choose 1 or 2 areas where you'll practice being absolutely clear. Maybe it's your availability, your time, or how you respond to people who interrupt your rest. Write down a few direct phrases and start using them deliberately. Avoid explaining or defending your position. The more you explain, the more others think your decision is up for discussion. You can be kind and firm at the same time. Clear communication doesn't require justification. A single sentence, calmly delivered, is often all it takes. People may test you once, but they'll stop when they see that your words match your actions. Being direct is not rude, it's responsible. It protects your time, your energy, and your emotional space. And once people understand that you say what you mean and mean what you say, they stop trying to push past your limits. That's the power of being unambiguous. That's how you make sure you're taken seriously. Setting boundaries isn't just about what you say, it's also about how you say it. One of the most effective tools you can use is emotional neutrality. When you communicate your limits without over-explaining, without frustration, and without emotional charge, your message lands with more weight. People tend to take you more seriously when you stay calm, direct, and consistent. The mistake many people make is attaching too much emotion to the act of saying no. They overcompensate with tone, facial expressions, or nervous energy, trying to soften the discomfort of holding their ground. But the more emotional energy you bring to the conversation, the more likely the other person is to focus on your delivery instead of your message. Emotional neutrality removes that distraction. It signals certainty. It shows you're not looking for approval. You're simply communicating a decision. You don't have to feel completely detached. You can care about someone and still hold firm. But you need to train your tone and body language to stay level. If someone gets upset or disappointed, let them. That reaction belongs to them, not you. Your responsibility is to remain steady, not to manage how others feel about your limits. If staying neutral is difficult, prepare in advance. Practice the exact sentence you want to say. Keep it short and clear, then say it out loud until it feels natural. When the moment comes, deliver it calmly, without rushing or apologizing. You're not trying to win an argument. You're not trying to justify anything. You're simply stating where you stand. People are less likely to argue with someone who shows no emotional tension. They sense that the decision has already been made. Over time, this approach earns you respect. You become someone whose words aren't up for debate. That's the goal, not to create conflict, but to remove the space where confusion and manipulation usually live. Neutrality isn't cold, it's clarity without noise. Not everyone will applaud your decision to protect your time, energy, and mental space. Some people will take distance. Others might push back harder, trying to guilt you into returning to old habits. It's not pleasant, but it's part of the process. When you start doing things differently, reactions will follow. And that's not a problem, it's just feedback. What matters most in these moments is how you interpret the response. Someone becoming distant isn't always rejection. It can be adjustment. If they relied on your availability without respecting your needs, they'll need time to recalibrate. And if they don't, that reveals something useful. They were never interested in mutual respect to begin with. There will be moments when you wonder if you were too firm. Doubts will creep in, especially if you're used to being the person who says yes to avoid tension. That's normal. But remind yourself why you started this process in the first place. You weren't being cruel, you were being honest. And if honesty causes someone to walk away, let them. Losing a connection that was built on imbalance isn't a failure, it's a necessary filter. It allows healthier, more stable relationships to take shape. You don't need dozens of people who expect access to you at any cost. You need a few people who respect your limits without making it a problem. Over time, these small acts of self-respect will shift how you see yourself. You'll feel stronger, clearer, more in control of your emotional life, and the temporary discomfort that came from disappointing others will feel minor compared to the relief of no longer disappointing yourself. Growth comes with consequence, but that consequence often clears the path for everything you were missing. Peace, space, and people who meet you with the same clarity you've now chosen to show. You've learned how to be clear. You've learned how to stop apologizing. You've practiced consistency, dealt with resistance, spoken directly, stayed emotionally neutral, and accepted the consequences that come with self-respect. None of these steps require perfection. They require decision. That's the real shift, not in how others treat you, but in how you decide to show up from now on. You're no longer living on other people's terms. You're no longer adjusting your tone, your boundaries, or your time just to avoid temporary discomfort. You've stopped waiting for approval. You've stopped hoping people will change if you just explain yourself better, and that alone puts you miles ahead of where you used to be. You don't need a dramatic turning point. You just need consistency. You keep showing up for yourself in small ways every single day. One clear no. One calm redirection. One moment where you hold your ground instead of folding. That's how the pattern breaks. That's how you stop getting hurt by the same people, the same behaviors, the same cycles, because you finally stopped giving them access. Some people won't like this new version of you. Let them go. The ones who truly see you, who truly value you, won't feel threatened by your clarity. They'll respect it. They'll match it. You're not weak for feeling. You're strong for deciding. Because when you finally choose yourself, not out of fear, not out of pride, but out of self-respect, you change everything. If this helped you in any way, consider subscribing. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to support this work, a like or a super thanks goes a long way. More importantly, keep showing up for yourself. That's where all of this starts to make sense.